Are you engaged to be married or considering divorce? Well, how do you protect your financial interest? Today, we're going to be speaking to Jacqueline Harounian Esquire, who is a recognized leader in the field of matrimonial and family law and a partner with the law firm Wisselman, Harounian and Associates. We're going to learn a little bit about prenuptial agreements, postnuptial agreements, and everything in between. Today, I'm excited to be joined via Zoom with Jacqueline Harounian Esquire with the law firm Wisselman, Harounian and Associates, PC. Jackie, thank you for being on here today.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, David. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's really my pleasure. So, Jackie, before we begin, please tell me a little bit about yourself, your firm, the type of law, type of practice that you run.
Yeah, sure. I'm a family law attorney in New York. I'm a partner in a firm called Wisselman, Harounian and Associates, and I've been with the same firm since law school. So I've been practicing for over 25 years,
Oh.
Exclusively in the area of family law. And believe it or not, I'm still married. I've been married for over 30 years. I have children. I certainly understand what family life is all about. And as we'll discuss today, family law is really changing in many exciting ways. And people need to know how the law is and how it affects their own lives when it comes to family law.
Now, matrimonial law, how did you decide to go into that discipline of practice?
I get that question all the time, and every day it reminds me how passionate I am about my work and how I look forward to coming into my office every day with an amazing team. What drew me to family law is the fact that when I started law school, I was already a mom. I started out very young as a mom, and there were family law classes being offered, and I took them, and then I got my very first job in this firm in my second year of law school, and I realized the issues facing families, really changing gender roles, what's expected of men, what's expected of women. And now that we're at a paradigm of joint custody, it has always kept my interest. Family law really is about psychology and relationships. And these are also topics that I'm very, very interested in.
Sure. Now, over the years that you've been practicing, have you seen an influx or an incline in divorce?
So yeah, I really stay on top of trends and statistics, and it's very interesting what's going on right now in our society, especially during a pandemic, where I think we all know weddings have been canceled and dating is a little challenging to say the least, and people living in quarantine aren't necessarily getting along all that well. So right now, it's accelerated a trend in the United States where the marriage rate is dropping. People are marrying at older ages. The divorce rate is also dropping, partly because there are fewer marriages, but there is also same-sex marriage, which has kind of hedged the numbers a little bit. And what we're seeing is that younger people, millennials, are marrying later and they're marrying better. They're making better choices. They're more financially stable. They're more educated. And that is leading to a scenario where the people that choose to get married are making better choices, and the divorce rate in that group is something around 30 to 35% right now.
Wow.
There are many people that don't choose to get married. There are many people that are single, others that are married but child-free, as they call it. What's happening right now is that there are so many options that are available to young people to form families or not, and make choices that are very different than their parents and grandparents did. And we are seeing very different attitudes and a reduction of stigma to the choices that young people are making in marriage. And there are lots of reasons behind that. A lot of it has to do with changes in family law over the past 25 years that I've been practicing.
What specific changes in those laws would you think contributed to this?
The biggest change has been the removal of fault grounds in most states, in New York State, as a way to move forward with a separation and divorce. It used to be that there were grounds for divorce that were really based on morality and religion. So it was about cruelty and abandonment and infidelity. And you had to really have a reason to get divorced. And a lot of that was based on the fact that people really were more traditional and religious. a generation or two back. What started to change was a more neutral grounds for divorce, which was based on being separated for a year. And in New York State, that was very common about 10 years ago, where people would want to get divorced. They didn't really want to move forward with grounds based on adultery. And
Right.
so there was like a 1 year waiting period. And in fact, some states still do have a waiting period requirement. Um, Right now, the most preferred, the most popular grounds for divorce in the United States, and certainly in New York, is no fault divorce. And no fault is based on a concept of irreconcilable differences. In New York, we call it irretrievable breakdown. And what it really does is take away the blaming and shaming aspect of a divorce. It really makes it more of a mutual, we don't really get along, we both want to separate. There's no defense to a no fault divorce. And we've taken out that whole chapter of divorce litigation that was focused on proving grounds and assigning blame. And that usually created a very negative tenor throughout the whole case. So that's the biggest reason for change, I think, in the divorce space. I think a lot of older people now can get divorced without stigma. They call that the gray divorce or the silver divorce phenomenon, where people that are older are no longer feeling stigmatized by filing for a no fault divorce. And there are a lot of other changes, including, and probably the biggest change, is the increasing economic power of women. Women are now earners. Most families in America have both parents working and raising children. There are a lot of households that are led by single parents. And so that's really created a very different landscape for divorce right now. Because, of course, and I always say this because I have a wonderful spouse who was very much an active father in raising our children, that if you have a married couple or a cohabiting couple and you have a woman who's advancing in her career, well, probably you have a partner in the home, whether it's a same-sex couple or a man and wife. You have the father or the other partner really also doing a lot of childcare, pickup and drop-offs, helping with homework, coaching, feeding, bathing. I mean, it all goes hand in hand. If you're going to have a successful career woman, you're going to have a partner in the home who's also doing some heavy lifting and caring for children
Sure.
in order to
Now
have a
that
successful marriage. Yeah.
that's actually going to lead into our topic for today, because we're here really to speak about financial protection, both pre-marriage and post-marriage, during marriage, because as you said, the gender roles, just things in essence are very different than what they were, say, 50 years ago, where we have spouses, whether it be same sex or traditional marriage, where it's a two-income family.
Right.
Both are participating, both are sharing in the duties. It's no longer where the wife is expected to stay home and do the laundry, cook, and clean all day. She's a contributor in a lot of cases today, especially. She may even be the breadwinner. And we see that the husbands are taking more of a hands-on role as well, taking care of the children, helping them with the study and doing everything from laundry. I love to do the laundry. I get upset if somebody in my house does the laundry. That's like my thing, and I'm proud of that. But it's we look, especially myself being in insurance and financial services a professional, we look at everything in the scope of planning and getting into marriage. A lot of people need to plan on what those roles are going to be. What do they look at 5-10 years down the road? But unfortunately, not all of us really can see or plan. I know not to really take this all over, but life looks differently for most people every 5 years. When you look back over that 5 years, it looks a lot different than what you've imagined. And going into the role of marriage, how does one really plan and look towards financial protection in that marriage? I mean, we could talk about prenuptial agreements and all, but how does one really look at that from a legal standpoint?
Well, from a legal standpoint, first of all, it's very important for people that live together, that make a commitment together, and certainly decide together to bring a child into the world. You really have to know what the laws are that affect you, what responsibilities you're taking on, and ask some questions about it so that you don't get blindsided later on. And really set your expectations for your marriage. And it really comes down to good communication with your partner. There has to be a communication. There in our country, in the United States, people will spend months and years planning a wedding. They'll go into all kinds of planning and considerable expense to plan an event that's going to last for a day or maybe a few days at a destination wedding, right? Or a honeymoon.
Sure.
But they don't really think beyond that. And we all know that there's a honeymoon period. A honeymoon period lasts beyond the honeymoon. But once couples live together, there are, reality does intrude. And reality is there are bills to pay. And once you bring children into the world, it's going to really change the couple, their relationship, their sex life, their finances. It's so important to be ready for that, to have discussions about it. And one of the most important discussions is going to be, is one of us going to stay home with children? Are we both going to help? Do we have a grandparent around to help with childcare? When they say it takes a village to raise a child, that is very true. You need to have a support system. I have 4 children. Thankfully, they're a little bit older now. My youngest is 16, but I worked full time during my pregnancies and when my children were small. And quite frankly, it's exhausting. Yeah, I don't think I really got a full night's sleep for many years. And I had a very, very active and loving partner, thank goodness. But even then, I had times when it was really overwhelming. And, people have to be prepared for that. Having a child, growing a family, there are going to be some difficult times, and you have to be willing to be mature enough to pitch in when your other partner is depleted and upset and exhausted. And there is a high divorce rate when children are 2 years old. That seems to be a breaking point when there's not enough childcare. It starts to impact the finances, and this is a discussion that people need to have. Children are a joy, they're a blessing. They bring so much fulfillment and enrichment to a person's life, but there are also a lot of difficult days when it comes to raising children, and I'm talking about healthy children. Now, you talk about children with special needs or who have medical challenges.
Sure.
That adds another layer of stress. We can talk about IVF and fertility. That's another big trend going on right now. That adds all kinds of financial and physical stress. And ultimately, parents have to be prepared for that, and they have to know how to ask for help. And that includes spending on childcare, good childcare, having family support. It would be great if corporations in this country gave more support to young families,
Sure.
in the form of paternity leave, maternity leave, health insurance, childcare credits. I mean, these are things that are important, and it's concerning because in the United States of America, our birth rate is dropping, and a lot of it is because there isn't enough help for families, and that can come in so many different ways.
Sure.
In terms of planning, financial planning, we can talk. I know we're going to talk a little bit about prenuptial agreements, which are very important and very popular these days. I actually was just quoted in the Wall Street Journal regarding prenuptial agreements and how popular they are with millennials and young people for all kinds of reasons. And prenuptial agreements, they can also be called postnuptial agreements, are really the closest thing in New York that resembles divorce insurance. It's the only way to really protect yourself and your assets. And the divorce rate is dropping, as I mentioned at the very beginning, for millennials, but it's still a significant risk. Getting married is risky. It's
Right.
risky to your finances. So, if you knew that you were going to invest money in the stock market and there was a 30% chance or 40% chance you would lose your money, you probably would really focus on planning and get investment advice, and maybe even buy insurance to protect yourself. And that's what a prenuptial agreement is. But just to take a step back before that, a successful relationship really involves communication, as I mentioned before. So
Absolutely.
as you are forming a relationship, way before you start to have an intimate relationship and children, you want to start communicating about. You can't ask your date, "Can I see your credit report?" But
Right.
you want to get a sense of how do they spend, how do they save, what is their lifestyle, what are their goals, and how do they fund their lifestyle goals, right? I mean, are you dating someone who's going to use every dollar of their credit to go book another trip? Or are you dating someone who is conservative in their spending and wants to save? Obviously, the former is a little bit more exciting than the latter, But having someone who has a sensible approach to saving money and investing is going to probably be someone who provides more financial stability when you grow your family and have children. And then there's all kinds of things that happen at midlife that you have to deal with. So you want to make sure that you gently probe the person you're dating in terms of student loans, spending, income, what their career track looks like. These are important, and increasingly, men are looking for this in their partners before they get married, because they want to marry someone also who has career goals or some potential to earn money, or is financially
Right.
conservative enough to save money. Because one of the biggest gripes that people have in marriages that fail is that the other partner spent too much and didn't care enough about credit, or had a very casual attitude regarding taking on debt and borrowing. I mean, these are risky. Finances, money is a very big part of why people get divorced.
Sure, absolutely. So that's actually really, really great advice on what to consider when debating whether you should go with a prenuptial agreement or not. What are the actual steps involved in putting together a prenuptial?
So it's actually a lot easier and friendlier than people realize. And the laws, though, do vary from state to state. So if you're listening to me now and you're not in New York, you definitely want to look into what the requirements are in your state. In New York State, a prenuptial agreement is enforceable and will be upheld in court, because that's the important part. If you're going to go through the trouble of doing a prenup, you want to make sure it's going to work in a courtroom.
Sure.
And there needs to be a lawyer on both sides. So generally, one lawyer is drafting it, the other lawyer is reviewing it. I can talk a little bit about that more later. It needs to be without an atmosphere of coercion or duress, which really means don't sign a prenup the day of the wedding. You want to do it ideally a month or two before, and maybe even longer than that. You want to sign off on it well before the wedding so that it's out of the way and you can focus on wedding planning. And the third requirement is that there has to be what's called full disclosure. It has to be a transparent process. And this goes back to what I said before. I mean, how great would it be if before you get married, you know what their net worth is, you know what their debts are,
Right.
you know what their tax return says, and you know what assets and debts they have. This is all required to have a prenup signing in New York. You get to really take a peek behind the curtain and see what's going on. And even without a prenup, if someone is listening to me and they don't do a prenup, at the very least have the nerve to have what I call a courageous conversation with someone you're in a relationship with. Find out what is going on. You don't want to be blindsided later on regarding debts and things like that.
So
So
I'm sorry, go right ahead.
no, I was going to say there are certain debts and assets that are going to be protected even without a prenup. But this is something, again, you should speak to an attorney about. There's something called a paperless prenup, where you can actually do your financial planning and careful bookkeeping in a way to really protect assets. But there's nothing like a prenup to sidestep the law. And that's what a prenup does. It acknowledges in a document that there's a certain law in the state, but that the parties signing the agreement want to sidestep the law and agree on what happens to their assets in the event of divorce and also in the event of death. So that's the other aspect of a prenup. It protects your property so that if you're newlyweds and God forbid something happens to you, your new spouse doesn't get all of your assets that you've accumulated up till that time. So it's divorce and death.
How does a prenuptial address things that change after the marriage, or I should say during the marriage? In other words, my understanding is if your spouse is currently in school or coming into the marriage and they have substantial student debt, you could have your prenuptial somewhat protect yourself against that spouse's debt with that. But what happens if they decide 5 years after the marriage begins, they want to all of a sudden go into school, go back for their master's, and they have to take out student loans? Does a prenuptial work retroactively to protect against that? Does it have to get updated?
You can always update an agreement, but just so you know, in New York State and most other states, student loan debt would never be the responsibility of a partner in a marriage.
Okay.
So the way it works is if you take out a student loan debt, let's say it's $50,000, and while you're in school or when you graduate, suddenly now there's a divorce, that student loan debt follows the person who took out the debt, because they're walking out the door with the asset, which is their increased in earning capacity. A student loan debt would never be a shared debt with or without a prenup unless, and this is the mistake some people make, they voluntarily take on student loan debt and put it in their own name, or guarantee it to get a better rate, or sign off on the debt as guarantor. That's never a good idea. And I even discourage parents doing it for their children unless they really have uh, the assets to back it up. You never want to sign on to a debt for something like education. A house is different because there's an asset that hopefully you're going to benefit from the sale of an asset. Student loan debt for a partner, a lot of times people make mistakes in an act of generosity or because they're trying to help. They will actually, transfer debt into their own name. Please don't ever do that. That's not a good idea. In a prenup, you can make it explicitly clear that student loan debt is never shared debt.
What other common mistakes do you see in a prenuptial agreement?
So in most states, including New York, you cannot address child support or custody issues relating to children in a prenup. And a lot of people don't understand that. It's very important that you know that. You can't agree in advance how you will take care of children financially or with regard to custody. One of the biggest trends that I see is the issue of spousal support. A lot of millennials marry people that are around their own age who are also educated and have income potential. So I very often see with young people that they want to avoid the obligation of supporting their spouse in the end of the marriage. I actually think that's a great idea, and most young people are willing to sign on to that because child support is not part of the prenup. But this idea that if we're married and the marriage doesn't succeed, I shouldn't be responsible for supporting my spouse. That's not a controversial topic. And that's one of the good things about prenuptial agreements that I've seen over the years. When I started out, as I said, over 20 years ago, prenuptials were almost always for a much older husband and a much younger wife. And there was very much this gold digger stereotype. And with good reason. People that are older want to protect the assets, and they also want to get married. So a prenup is a good incentive to get married. A lot of times people will say, I won't get married unless I know I'm protected. I totally get that. And a waiver of spousal support is really, in many cases, a very fair concept, especially if people are around the same age and are educated and are able to earn. So you can also do waivers of legal fees in the event of a divorce. That creates a disincentive to litigate. And the most popular reason why people sign prenups have to do with family businesses and real estate assets that they own prior to the marriage. And it would be a mistake not to really focus on those types of assets because, generally speaking, businesses and real estate property are not passive assets. They grow in value over time. And under the law of most states, if an asset grows in value during a marriage, even if it was titled in the name of one partner before the marriage, there is still a component of it that's marital property. And the reason why it's such a great idea to do a prenup in the case of a business or a piece of real estate or even intellectual property, which is another big boom in prenuptial agreements, is that it really moves those issues off the table in the event of a divorce. So it used to be when prenups were less favored, that people will go through a divorce and there's a family business or a real estate partnership on the side, and that gives license to the attorney for the non-titled spouse to serve subpoenas, to request bank statements, to request appraisals, going back. It's exceedingly expensive, involve family members from a business and take depositions. And really, it's like a harassment technique in many cases. They were justified in doing that because of the marital property component of these types of assets. A prenuptial agreement, generally speaking, sets the parameters of what is going to happen to that asset. So, for example, if the wife owned a co-op before the marriage and she's renting it out after the marriage, the agreement would say that the rental income from the co-op shall be used to pay off the expenses of the co-op. The co-op is completely off the table as separate property of the wife. And unless the wife uses marital income to pay the expenses of that co-op, it's really untouchable in the event of a divorce. A few provisions like that can really save a lot of money.
Sure.
It can really avoid arguments during a marriage because now you have a document that sets forth how assets are going to be managed and handled. And really it really contributes to peace of mind and
Sure.
during marriage. And so I'm always in favor of that. Whatever couples can do to isolate problematic issues, money issues, resolve them in the proper way, and kind of put it away, it really can lead to marital harmony. And that is something I'm very much in favor of. I think whatever can avoid disputes is really a good idea in a relationship of any kind.
Sure. I
Uh,
definitely appreciate that. Right.
yeah, another topic that comes up frequently, and I'm going to talk now mostly about postnups. So postnup is the same thing as a prenup. You need the same exact um, safeguards. You need to have a lawyer. You need to have full disclosure. It needs to be without pressure or coercion.
Mhm.
But a postnup sometimes can be used. For example, I've had cases where the husband wires money overseas to India to his parents because that's what he does in his culture, and that's something that his
Right.
parents need. And the wife gets upset about it. Why are you sending $500 a month to your parents? I don't agree with that. So what they can do to resolve that is they can agree that all of that money that's sent overseas is something that would be credited to the wife in the event that the marriage ends. So that she knows she has security there, that those assets are not going out of the marital estate without her having some um, recourse in the event the marriage ends. The same thing with gambling debts. The same thing with excessive compulsive shopping and credit card debts. There are ways to isolate these issues, put them on paper, and so people can stop fighting about it. And that's always a great thing.
Right. When it comes, because you brought up about businesses and how the prenuptial could protect a spouse with a business. So in my practice, I deal a lot with buy-sell agreements and the funding of buy-sell agreements. Is there any possibility of a prenuptial and a buy-sell agreement conflicting with each other? Does that happen?
It does happen, and then you'd really need to revise or do a subsequent agreement. Prenuptial agreements are very commonly used in estate planning as part of a strategy for business succession, for shareholders agreements and things like that. There should be a coordinated strategy because the rights of the wife or the husband, whoever the non-titled spouse is in the business, that's in a contract that's enforceable. So you don't want to have other documents or contracts that contradict that because then all you're doing is really setting up a legal battle. uh, the most important concept regarding these types of contracts, I call them love contracts, are you sign them when parties are still getting along and they still want the marriage to continue. And there's a lot of goodwill and trust there, usually, because the needs of both sides are going to be protected. A lot of times we do prenuptial agreements with life insurance or postnuptial agreements where it's agreed that certain assets will be put in the name of the wife because there are business assets in the name of the husband, or maybe children of a first marriage, or maybe one of the adult children in this marriage are going to take over the business. And so there has to be a way to provide peace of mind for all parties involved, and feeling like they are secure financially. And it has to be in an atmosphere where there is goodwill in the marriage, there's a willingness to continue the marriage, and a desire to do an agreement that's fair, and ultimately saves everyone a lot of money, sometimes taxes, and creates marital harmony in the case of a business succession plan.
Sure. Now, many of my clients come to me because during the divorce, the court orders them to take out life insurance. Why is that? Why is that something that actually happens?
Yeah, so life insurance is a very important component of securing either child support, college obligations, spousal support, and sometimes a pension obligation. So that's the mostly the areas where I see life insurance being ordered by courts, especially if plans were already in place with beneficiaries designated before the divorce. So almost always when a divorce starts, the court is going to issue a restraining order so that people can't suddenly change beneficiaries and cancel policies. Thankfully, term policies are much more affordable than ever before. So there's been a shift that I see. Maybe you agree, right? From whole policy to
Absolutely.
term. So people generally can afford them. In the case of pensions, there has to be a way to protect the wife's share in the event of the husband's death. So I'm going to use that as an example. Obviously, it could be either gender, but let's say you have the husband is a police officer, and the parties agree that he's going to share half the value of his pension with her, which is really the law, right? It's an economic partnership. She gets her marital portion. But as most people know, or maybe they don't know, there's a higher distribution to the parties if she waives a death benefit. So otherwise, if he dies, she will continue to get payments, but at a lower monthly amount. So it really is a catch-22. And sometimes parties and their attorneys have to consider the different alternatives. And the way you kind of fix that gap is with life insurance, especially if there's a policy in place that makes sure that the wife will be getting some compensation for the lower amount. And this is how we resolve some of these conflicts. Life insurance can really be a good way to protect parties. Same goes with spousal support, or even the share of a business. You want to create a vehicle that will provide some security to a spouse that doesn't really have the income or the assets. So life insurance is a great way to do that.
For the life insurance, must they have a standalone policy, or is a group policy through their employer acceptable?
So it depends. It really depends on the budget of the family. I mean, sometimes money is tight, especially in a divorce. And so if there's a policy through the employment, generally these are not very high numbers. Obviously, that's going to be part of the picture. It depends on how many children there are, what their needs are, and what the cost of a term policy is going to be. We generally like to keep enough coverage until the child graduates college. So we will factor in what a state school will cost, because in New York, there's a state school cap for the cost of college. It's generally at least a $500,000 policy for a young child to take them all the way through camp and college and that point of independence. We also do agreements where the face amount of the policy goes down every year as the child gets older. So by the time you have an older teenager, the policy is really only a couple $100,000, and that's generally affordable for most people. And that's in the contract, enforceable by the court. And in most contracts, if you violate it, you might be on the hook for legal fees for the other side. So there is a motivation on both sides to follow the life insurance order.
So the life insurance is something I see obviously quite often, but one of the things I don't really see, and I'm not really understanding of why, maybe you can help me with this. I don't see court orders for disability income insurance, because the
Right.
reality of it, a person, especially during their earning years, is more likely to get injured or, ill, or suffer some type of disability rather than die. And, disability income insurance pretty much protects that income during your working years. Why aren't the courts actually demanding that spouses take out that?
Yeah, that's not required. You're absolutely right. I don't see, if people agree to it, that's fine. I have seen couples agree to disability insurance as a requirement, especially if there's a certain health issue or there's a reason why that's a risk. You don't generally see courts order it. It's not really mainstream as an order the same way that life insurance is. If someone does become disabled, they can't just say, I'm disabled and I don't want to pay child support. There are going to be requirements that they show proof of a disability, proof that they've applied for disability benefits. And then there's still a requirement to pay support, even despite the disability. It depends on the amount of compensation, how much money we're really talking about. In a perfect world, everyone would prioritize disability insurance, especially high earners that have a lot of responsibility to support, their children and maintain assets.
Sure.
I have seen agreements, especially in high net worth cases, that require disability insurance to be paid.
Right. Now, in the insurance world, there's a lot of formulas that are used to pretty much gauge what a person would be allowed to be covered for, whether it be disability income insurance, life insurance, something say like human life value. What goes into divorce? Is there an actual formula that's used that states what a person is entitled to in the divorce for alimony? Because I know that's, especially in my own family where there's been divorces, nobody really knows how that's figured out.
Yeah. Spousal support is one of the trickiest, really, uh, most difficult issues to really predict in a divorce, because there are so many variables that go into spousal support. And it's a very touchy issue because no one wants to support their spouse when the divorce is over. They're quite willing to support their children. They're willing to part with assets, especially in a long marriage. It is what it is. But the idea of supporting an ex-spouse, especially if there's been infidelity or bad behavior, it's difficult for people. And nowadays, about a third of the people that walk into my office are women breadwinners. Sometimes they have to pay spousal support. And boy, they hate it even more than the men used to hate it. I mean, they really don't want to pay it. But in New York, we call it spousal rehabilitative maintenance. It's not called alimony anymore. And the change in title started about 10 years ago, the same time as the no fault divorce laws.
Okay.
And so the one guideline, the one that we can predict, is the duration of spousal support is now in the law as 1/3 to 1/2 the length of the marriage. And that 1/3 to 1/2 really enables lawyers and judges to really create a zone of what the entitlement is. And then because it's no longer tax deductible, that's one of the laws that changed in 2017 by President Trump. Uh, that tax incentive is no longer there, which actually has made the negotiations a lot more streamlined and easier in a way. Um, Spousal support is always going to be a difficult issue. The laws in New York are very, very gender neutral. And there's becoming more and more this idea that spousal support should be based on the actual needs of the spouse and not the lifestyle that the spouse used to have. So it's a hotly contested issue. And I'll tell you, David, what I tell my clients, whether they're men or women that stayed at home or maybe didn't have a career and they were supported, and they're going to get child support for a period of time, I really, really encourage them from the beginning to go out there and look for something that's going to bring them not only some income, but also medical benefits. And it's so important that they do that. Obviously, the ages of children make it a little bit more challenging for some rather than others, but you're always going to do better. Always going out there, finding some stream of income, or going back to school and setting the stage for the next chapter of your life. That's always a better idea than fighting in court for an extra 1,000 or 2 or 3 in spousal support. Uh,
Yeah.
it's just not worth it. It's not worth it. The litigation costs can be quite high, unless we're talking about a very high net worth situation, which I wish all my clients had, but they don't.
Sure.
Spousal support, people fight over it, and it leads people into court when they really could settle out of court sometimes. So they should be careful when they take positions regarding spousal support. I actually wrote a book on this very issue and the other issues related to divorce called Divorce Reality Check. And the reality check, I wrote this book about 5 years ago. It really was because of the changing laws and the fact that, you know, people would walk into my office completely blindsided by what they think they're entitled to versus what the law is. And the law is becoming more fair in terms of gender. There are fathers getting joint custody every day. They're asking for it. A lot of them have 50-50 time with their children. This is becoming more and more of a thing that's being accepted and encouraged, and I think it's great. And on the other hand, women are earning. I mean, they're contributing. They're the ones providing medical insurance. You know, they're the ones with assets to divide more than ever before. And so it's important, especially for the stay-at-home spouse that's been in a dependent role. They need to be careful what they think they're going to get in a divorce. They need to really listen to their attorneys and hire attorneys that are going to tell them the truth about how much a case is going to cost and what they really are going to get in the courtroom.
Sure.
It's important.
Now, I've been fortunate enough and blessed in my career to be heavily involved in the high net worth and affluent communities, celebrity, things of that nature. And often I come across many, again, high net worth individuals who haven't done proper estate planning. They don't have these type of vehicles or instruments in place. They didn't have the type of planning, and whether it was from their handlers, not directing them. So I know for a fact there are also individuals married today who don't have prenups or anything in place.
Right.
What happens then? When you just don't have any of these things set? What's that look like?
Well, you know, luckily it's never been easier than now to find advisors and get some advice. And a lot of that you can do without investing too much. I think people need to stop living in denial Stop thinking things will take care of themselves. It won't. I mean, it seems like during this pandemic, we've heard numerous stories of celebrities with very high net worth that haven't done estate planning. It creates a really big problem for their heirs.
Right.
You're inviting the government into your life and into your finances, and it's probably not going to be as cost effective as if you had done some planning. It's shocking that people, even with the best advisors and all the ability in the world to pay for planning, don't do it. So even people with a very modest net worth, there's a peace of mind that comes from signing a will, from talking to your partner and your children about what your needs and goals are, having a healthcare proxy signed. These are not expensive to do. And there are very effective tax planning measures that can be taken once you get once you get into your, I would say, 50s and 60s. Earlier, if you're going through a divorce or you have a health issue, it's time to start really putting things down on paper and hopefully putting it in a drawer and not looking at it, but knowing it's there. It really does give peace of mind, and it's the right thing to do, and it can save your heirs and people that you love lots and lots of money. And
That's
aggravation,
fantastic.
aggravation. There's a lot of aggravation in dealing with
Absolutely.
unprobated, estates. It's really a very big mess.
Absolutely. I often say that what I really do is I remove the burden from people with having to worry about these decisions, these things coming up. We're already planning for them for when they do happen. And of course, there's always, same thing with divorces. I'm sure there's always variables that you just can't plan for because we don't foresee it. We're not really hardwired to foresee all the negative things that can happen to us. So seeking out the advice of professionals such as yourself, what should one actually look for? How should one actually vet a good divorce attorney, matrimonial law? What should they look for?
Well, the general rule is you should interview like face to face. And these days, a lot of it is on Zoom, although our office is open. But you should really have face to face consultations with probably at least 3 to 5 attorneys before you commit to one. Most attorneys have the same financial terms, similar retainer agreements. All of that in New York is set forth, by the authorities regarding retainer agreements. So there's not going to be a lot of variability there. But you want to hire an attorney who has some level of experience, that knows the judges in your area, right? And not that you're going to go into court, but someone who's confident about going to court if it's necessary. Someone who's going to encourage resolving disputes, especially custody disputes, and someone that you have some sort of a rapport with, who's going to respond to you and is on the same page with you regarding your goals. Anyone who's telling you something that sounds too good to be true is probably not being fully honest. So people should keep in mind that the old rules regarding sole custody to mothers and lifetime spousal support, and really crazy financial scenarios, those are not the law anymore in most states. So you're only going to know that if you meet with a number of divorce professionals that are experienced, I would say at least 10 years, and really hear what they have to say. What are their strategies? I would be careful of meeting with a lawyer who encourages you to serve papers at your spouse at work, the following day. I don't know that that's the right way to start a case. It's certainly going to feel good if you're angry, but it's probably going to launch a battle that's going to be very costly. So you want to hopefully find a professional that will keep you calm, give you information, and some level of predictability of what your case is going to look like.
Is there any benefit to seeking out an attorney who is the same sex of yourself? So if you're a female going with a female attorney or a male going with a male attorney or vice versa, is there any, I hate to say benefit, but is there any?
It's very hard to generalize because, people have their own individual preferences. In my firm, as I mentioned, we have 9 attorneys. We have men and women in base almost equal number. We're all different. And so I don't think you can generalize based on gender. I do think sometimes people feel more comfortable opening up. A man might feel more comfortable opening up to another man as opposed to a woman, or the other way. It really depends on the individual, on their psychology, and how they feel about the professional they're hiring. Hiring a divorce attorney is really a very important decision. There are going to be things that come out that are potentially embarrassing, things that make you afraid. There's a lot of uncertainty until the court process is over. And family law attorneys, more than almost any other type of attorney, we're really counselors. We are therapists in a very real way. Our job is to make the process easier, and your lawyer should make your life easier, give you information that is reliable and accurate, and calm you down, because it's a very overwhelming experience to go through a divorce. But most people that get through it, they don't necessarily have good things to say about the process, but they are happier on the other side of it. And for many people, it's a liberation. It's a chance to kind of press reset and start their lives again, hopefully in a happier way. So the person you hire is important. The message I always put out there is that you don't want to make an enemy. This person is probably going to be in your life, especially if you
Right.
have children. And you have to make peace with what you're going through, not live in denial, and forgive if you can,
Right.
because you don't want to leave a legacy of anger for your children, and you don't want that for yourself. To carry that anger around is a
Sure.
very heavy burden.
Sure. And it's unfortunate because obviously being in the profession I'm in and just being a general person, having family members who've been divorced, it's sometimes it get very ugly. And, I always try to, encourage people not to talk bad about their, soon to be ex-spouse or ex-spouse, on social media platforms and things of that nature. I always try to disparage that. Do you have any good advice for anybody who's currently seeking out divorce, considering divorce? Do you have any good, information or advice that you would like to share?
I mean, again, what I want to encourage is that most people get through the process, and after the first few weeks and months, it starts to normalize, and they can actually see a light at the end of the tunnel at some point in the future. Taking on a contested proceeding is going to make that light go farther away and make it harder to get there. So you want to do whatever it is you can to keep the tone positive, business-like. Most divorce really does come down to money. You want to listen to the professionals advising you, make a deal, and move forward. It's never a good feeling to be in any type of litigation longer than you need to. It's extremely stressful.
Right.
And lawyers make a lot of money based on people. We can't just blame the lawyers. There are people that are very angry and want to use the court system to inflict pain on their
Sure.
spouse, not necessarily understanding the effect it's having on themselves and their children. So
Right.
I do encourage people to settle almost always. At the same time, I'm prepared to litigate if I need to. My clients know that. But the best case is one that's over. I'm very fortunate after all these years to have most of my practice based on referrals. And I really value each and every client. And I'm the kind of attorney that's going to try to resolve the case and not continue it. And if someone wants a different type of lawyer, there are plenty of them around. And that's not to knock the other lawyers or clients that choose those lawyers. But, if you hire a shark, if you continue a case longer than it's healthy, it's eventually going to affect your own health and certainly your own bank account.
Right. Absolutely. Jackie, this has been amazing. You've given so much information out there because there's just it's a scary thing. It's a scary thing for a person to get married, to go through a divorce. It's a very, very scary and intimidating thing. And there's just so much misleading information out there. We all tend to look towards our peers, our family members for advice. And that advice isn't always good advice. So this was a really, really great topic. And I'm really glad to have had you on here to speak about this. And I hope that we could do some more, have some more conversation about this in the future.
My pleasure.
Mhm.
Anytime, any
Thank you.
topic that relates to finances or the law,
Sure.
relationships, that really is something that I enjoy talking about. And I think it's important for people to understand what they can control and what they
Right.
can't. And one of the
Right.
things that people can control is their own attitude towards their own money and the way they behave towards people they love or that are in their life. These are things that are under our control.
Right.
So people should always remember that. And proactive planning is extremely important. So
Absolutely.
really.
Absolutely. Well, with that said, now you are very involved in a lot of volunteer work and leadership roles. You are also involved with a lot of publications and media. You currently have a #1 Amazon bestseller called Networked, a few other things. Tell us a little bit about what you got going on. Tell us a little bit about Networked. How can people find you?
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm very excited that I co-authored a book with 19 other women attorneys during the pandemic. It was on the bestseller list, and we're being invited to speak all over with respect to our experience. and it really demonstrates the power of networking. And networking is a very important part of my practice. It's how I get new clients. It's one of the reasons
Sure.
why I'm on your podcast today. And connection is a very big part of how people are getting through this pandemic. So Network is a book I'm very proud about. And the monies that we've generated are going to a very worthy charity, the National Women's Law Project.
Oh, wow.
I also mentioned another book that I wrote a few years ago that's available on Amazon. It's called Divorce Reality Check.
Hmm.
If anyone wants to hear more about it, you can contact me. I also can email chapters of the book without cost if people contact me. But the bottom line, the message of the book is really consistent with the message we talked about today, which is that people, it's on you to become educated about the laws affecting you and your family. It's on you to be proactive about protecting your assets. Don't live in denial. Try to deal with challenges and conflicts and resolve them as early as possible, and move forward with your life, hopefully with some security for yourself and your family.
Fantastic. Do you have any upcoming projects that you'd like to share, talk about? Do you have any new media coming out?
I don't have any other books coming out this year, but if anyone wants to follow me on LinkedIn, I do quite a bit of speaking engagements on a variety of topics related to family law. I have some ones upcoming on fertility law and also religious divorce. I have a little bit of a niche practice in both of those areas. So if anyone wants to learn more about those topics or any family law topics, I'm quite active on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. And I'm also on Clubhouse, which is a new social media app, talking about those types of issues. Also, domestic violence. I do quite a bit of speaking on that topic too.
Excellent. Well, again, Jackie, thank you so much for being a part of this today. You certainly educated me. It's I don't even know what to say. Just this has been overwhelming. I plan on sharing this a lot because unfortunately today divorce is something that I believe is a little bit more common than it ever has been. I think to a large regard, we're a lot more desensitized towards it, and we're pretty much okay with it at any age. So I just think this is a great topic. I think you have great information, and I really encourage anybody who is seeking premarital advice, postmarital advice, to come and speak with you. So again,
Thank
thank
you
you for
so much.
coming on today.
My pleasure. I have a free consultation, and I encourage anyone who's looking for a professional to interview with you. And I'm happy to recommend your services to David. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.